I absolutely agree there. And I think what's interesting is a lot of the early adopters of Bitcoin seem to enjoy the freedom go up along with the number go up technology, whereas this mainstream cohorts are probably far more inclined towards number go up and therefore aren't that worried about things like self custody and addresses and God forbid UTXOs and that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose when you're thinking going forward now with these ETFs, there's been a lot of kind of movement of late. We're seeing daily updates from the Bloomberg analysts giving us inflows, outflows. And then even today, we saw a lot of outflows, apparently as much as $1 billion from GBTC. Somewhere between a third and a half was related to FTX estate now selling. Talk to us a little bit about that sort of process now from it's now that it's launched and financial advisors are now potentially able to recommend this. And then what that means going forward, if we look at, let's say, gold, the gold ETFs and their market caps and how Bitcoin could eventually swallow a little bit of that.
Yeah, so talking about the inflows and outflows, there was kind of a pent-up demand for a large number of owners of GBTC to exit that fund. There are a lot of companies and institutions that have gone into bankruptcy that were holding a lot of GBTC. And the story behind that is actually pretty interesting. I don't want to go too deep into that story, but I wrote a very long Twitter thread on this, on the history of this GBTC arb trade, which is why GBTC was sort of spread out in this ecosystem and why so many players owned it. And a lot of these financial players went bankrupt, and FTX was one of them. It was holding a very large number of GBTC, I think about 22 million shares, which was worth about $1 billion. And in the bankruptcy process, FTX needs to liquidate those GBTC. So they're forced sellers to pay back creditors in the FTX estate. So there will be a process where GBTC is going to provide downward pressure on the Bitcoin price because of these liquidations and the bankruptcy processes that are going on. There's FTX, there's Celsius, Voyager, Genesis. There's a lot of them,
Mm.
and a lot of these estates hold GBTC. So that's gonna put a pressure on the downward pressure on the price of Bitcoin for a while. But eventually we'll get to an equilibrium where these bankruptcy processes have ended and all of these estates have been liquidated. And once that happens, the effect of the ETF is just going to be this giant liquidity channel into Bitcoin. Once Bitcoin finds its equilibrium and starts creeping up as it always does, the amount of liquidity that can flow into Bitcoin now is much, much greater. So I think in the short term, the way to think about this is there could be some pain just because there are forced sellers out there who need to get rid of their GBTC to pay back creditors in these bankruptcy processes.
Mm.
But in the long term, the liquidity channel that's been established by the creation of these ETFs will make it so that once the bull run really gets going, a lot more liquidity will be able to flow into Bitcoin. So I think the price could go much, much higher, much faster once the bull market really starts going.